Very beautiful. Tasmania. Oh, wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna wait and see what we find out. I'm gonna try to find out where he is.
他接下去是找到了教授，因为姐姐主持教授。
Professor Keiko. Thank you, Michael. You know where that is? Yeah, we'll call him. Yeah. Thank you.
If we cannot find Professor now, can we find Tom Mackey?
Professor Gary Baum.
Very bound. Okay, we'll try to call him too. I know that they're getting ready. I have an idea. I know where they'll be shortly. Let me find out. Let me check his schedule. Okay, just a moment, please. Thank you. Thank you.
他去看看，因为他可能估计到他们下一个的节目。这个女的，
她是做什么的？
你们放点。
I'm so sorry. All right.
My name is Satguru Bodhinatha Valen Swami. My country is United States, and we live in the state of Hawaii. The religion is Hindu, and the denomination of Hinduism is Saivite. When we say Saivite, it means that our concept of God is that God is Lord Shiva, and that's why we're called Saivite.
Thank you. and you just mentioned that your God is Lord Shiva. If you could tell us what is the concept of God in your religion?
In Hinduism, the concept of God often gets confused because most people think in Hinduism there are simply many gods. But of course, to the Hindu, that's not correct. Each Hindu believes in a one supreme being, but they don't agree on what that supreme being's name is, nor on the attributes of the supreme being. And that's where it gets confused. In our tradition, the name of God is Shiva. Shiva is both a personal God, meaning he has form, looks like a person. Of course, he dwells in heaven, but he looks like a person. He's also impersonal in that he is an all-pervasive consciousness, and he even transcends that as absolute reality.
Okay. What other gods are there in the Hinduism?
In our tradition of Hinduism, there are secondary gods, but they're quite secondary. They're not to be confused at all with the Supreme Being. In some traditions, such gods are called archangels, for example, to distinguish them from God. One of the most prominent is Ganesha. Lord Ganesha is a secondary god, and also Lord Murugan. These are both the major secondary gods in our tradition.
What's the difference between your major god and the secondary god?
The difference between the major god, the supreme being, and the secondary gods are that the major god created the secondary gods. He's the creator of all, including the secondary gods. He's the supreme being. He's even worshipped by the secondary gods. They're simply his helpers. An analogy can be made to a king and his ministers. The king does not govern alone. He uses ministers to help. So the supreme god is similar to the king, and the secondary gods are similar to the ministers.
I see. And so what's the difference between Shiva and Vishnu?
The difference between Shiva and Vishnu is the difference between the Saivite denomination of Hinduism and the Vaishnavite denomination of Hinduism. To Saivites, God is Shiva, whereas to Vaishnavites, God is Vishnu.
And do you know what is the difference between these two gods?
The simplest explanation of the difference is there are different names for the Supreme Being, different concepts of the Supreme Being. They're each the Supreme Being, but to a different denomination of Hindus.
Very good. So would you consider yourself a polytheistic religion?
Quite often Hinduism is described as polytheistic, meaning it believes in many gods without any of them being supreme. However, no Hindu thinks that way. As I mentioned at the beginning, to each Hindu there is a one supreme being. So definitely Hindus do not consider themselves polytheistic.
Could you please tell us about the concept of life, death, and resurrection?
In terms of life, death, and resurrection, Hindus believe in the concept of reincarnation. The concept of reincarnation is central to Hindu belief. Reincarnation, of course, means that we live on earth more than once. Therefore, in terms of life and death, we die, but we are reborn. After a few years normally, we live again, we die, and then we are reborn. Eventually, after many, many lives, we achieve what could be called resurrection. The Hindu term is liberation, or moksha. And that means we've evolved spiritually enough to the point where we don't need to be reborn.
Is that when the person achieves the state of godhood?
Liberation, moksha, requires someone to have a profound experience of God. That is part of it. It also requires someone to resolve all of their karmas, that which binds them to earth. So those two factors, when those are achieved, resolving karmas and realizing God, causes liberation or moksha to occur.
Do you have a proof that a person is reincarnated? What is the proof for that?
In terms of a proof for reincarnation, there are a number of books on that. I can't quote the names of them, but many people remember their past lives, and these memories have been verified by going to the places that they said they lived in past lives, and indeed, details of their past lives were able to be verified. In terms of scientific proof, there is no scientific proof. No, religion and science really are quite distinct approaches to life. Science does not believe in God. Religion believes in God.
What is concept of sin, repentance, and forgiveness in your religion?
In Hinduism, we believe that sin is wrong action, harmful action. We do not believe in any original sin or any sin that comes with us other than that caused by our own action. So sinful actions are punished, in a sense, through the law of karma. In other words, God doesn't directly punish us, but He's created the law of karma, which means good actions are rewarded, and for bad actions, you get punished, or you receive the same punishment you gave to another in this or a future life. In terms of retribution or atoning for sinful actions, that can be done a number of ways. Intense prayer can atone for sins. Some type of austerity, fasting can atone for sins. Or simply being a very kind, generous person who's always helping others can also cause atonement to take place.
How about your God Siva? Does he have anything to do with forgiveness of sin? Is he involved in this atonement?
Does God forgive sins? Is He involved in atonement? He can forgive sins in the sense of through intense worship. And that's one of the reasons Hindus go to temples to worship, is to receive the blessings of God. And those blessings, if they come in a certain form, can get rid of the remnants of sin.
Do you believe in Satan like the monotheistic religions believe?
Hindus do not believe there is a one person, a Satan or a devil. They believe there are devilish beings, but they certainly aren't that powerful. They are simply negative beings, the equivalent of negative angels that exist. So we have the good angels and the bad angels. But there's no Satan, there's no evil person to offset God.
Do you believe in prophets having been sent to different nations, to different tribes, different people?
Hinduism does accept special beings, and they're called avatars, but that's not in our particular tradition of Hinduism. That's the Vaishnava tradition, believes that God Himself is born on earth occasionally to correct problems. But in the Saivite tradition, we do not have prophets or avatars. God always remains transcendent, never is born on earth. And what we have are gurus. Gurus are individuals that are normal human beings, but they've lived a long time and are very wise and very spiritual. And because of that, because of having been born many, many lives, and because of spiritual attainments, they're able to guide others. So that's the closest we have in the Saivite tradition to a prophet.
So you don't have one person that you can say, this is the great person in our tradition, he's our prophet. You don't have just one person?
In the Saivite tradition, there is no one historic individual that's considered a prophet or considered unique. It's an ongoing process, so that in any generation, at any time on earth, there can be great spiritual teachers, but no one is looked at in the past as being the one special teacher.
How do you view Prophet Muhammad? Do you know about him, or how do you see him?
In terms of Prophet Muhammad, unfortunately, I don't know that much. I've never formally studied Islam, but we certainly have respect for Prophet Muhammad and for the Islamic religion and respect for his unique place in that religion.
Do you think that prophets actually came to give a particular message to mankind? If you do believe that, what do you think their message was?
For Muhammad?
No, all prophets.
Just all prophets. In terms of prophets coming to give messages to mankind, I think mankind is not static. Mankind's needs are constantly changing. The message that mankind needs to hear changes according to the time and history that it happens. So I think prophets in general are guiding mankind from where he is a few steps into the future.
If all messengers are from God, why are there so many differences in religions and the messages that we hear?
Why is it that there are so many different messages then from the prophets and the different religions? Well, I think it relates to the fact that it's occurred over thousands of years and occurred over many, many different civilizations, many, many different languages and value structures. Mankind, even in this day of our global society with global communication, there are major differences between the peoples of different countries. So it's only natural that the message for different people needs to be different.
How do you view Islam compared to other religions, and especially your religion, the difference?
In terms of comparing Islam to the Hindu religion, I'd say the only, not the only, but the most exposure to Islam I've had is in Malaysia, because we go to Malaysia quite often. And in terms of how Hinduism, say for example, in Malaysia compares to Islam, in Malaysia, Islam is very much participated in a organized or regimented way by the Muslims in Malaysia. You know, they all go to the mosque on a certain day and they all observe Ramadan. And when it comes to the Hindus, some will go, some won't go, some go on one day, some go on other days, some fast, some don't fast. It's the difference between something that's very structured, which everyone is following in an organized way, versus Hinduism doesn't have that kind of structure or organization. It's very individualistic. You have many groups in Malaysia, Hindu groups all doing something quite different. It's not at all comparable in terms of structure and uniformity.
Which religion do you consider to be the last religion?
Last meaning?
Which religion do you consider to be the last religion? Like, you know, because we have certain ideas, but what is the last religion? Do you have that concept also?
In terms of the idea of there being a last religion and which religion will be the last religion, Hinduism doesn't address that question. Its basic concept is that all religions are good. And the individuals in their various religions are fine being placed there. There's no need for them to move to another religion. And that it's all going well as it is. And in terms of a last religion, we really don't have a concept as to religions changing from the way they are at this time.
And what is your view of the Quran? Muslims' holy book?
In terms of the Quran as the Muslims' holy book, we, I think, could say that the respect with which Muslims hold the Quran is certainly admirable and to be emulated by other religions in terms of books and items they considered sacred.
And the last question is, with all the differences in religions, how can we create more peace and tolerance within ourselves?
In terms of how to create more peace and tolerance within ourselves, with religions differing so much in their beliefs and practices, the concept that we put forward is mutual respect. That if one religion can view another religion with respect and feel that that religion is as important as to that person as our religion is to us, and if we can learn to be happy with differences, with pluralism, that there is such a diversity among peoples in terms of religion and other qualities, then definitely we can all get along in a better way.
Thank you very much. A little bit about your background, and I will start asking
Okay.
questions.
My name is Michael Melchior. I am a rabbi. I live in Jerusalem. I have for many years been in the public life in Israel. I've been in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset, and in the cabinet. I'm leading work of coexistence between Jews and Arabs in Israel, and we have a big movement of Jewish-Islamic dialogue and peacemaking. We have built a center in Jerusalem called Mosaica, and our Islamist friends have built a center in Gaza and a center in Kfar Qasem, where the Islamic movement in the Holy Land was born. And we are working together with many projects of teaching and working for justice, for social justice, and trying to help to make peace in the Holy Land.
So what do you think would be the steps necessary to achieve this peace?
Well, we see again and again that our political leaders are failing, sometimes because they don't want really to make peace, and sometimes because they want but they don't know how to. And I think that, I don't think that the conflict in the Middle East is a religious conflict. I think it is a territorial conflict. Two nations claiming the same land as theirs. And therefore I think that the only solution which can be is to create two states who will live in peace as neighbors, peaceful neighbors. Maybe eventually they can become a confederation together, but that we create the states of Israel and the states of Palestine who will live in peace together. This is my belief. At the same time, we will not reach to that point. Most people, by the way, today, most Palestinians and most Israelis are supporting a two-state solution. There is a reason why we don't get there. We know where we have to go, we know where we are, but we don't know how to narrow down the distance. And therefore we get again and again into a mess of violence, and people are suffering, human tragedies, people are killed, people are hurting. And I think that religion plays there a major role. That if religious teachers and religious leaders can get together and can say enough is enough of the suffering, enough of the bloodshed. From our religions, we have a source of redemption, of helping people. And we can do this only if we can do it together. If I say, look at it from the point of view of Israel, of the Jewish people, we say, what's the point to make peace with some Palestinian or Arab leader if we can't make peace with Islam? If Islam won't let us be here at all. And therefore, when we hear Islamic leaders, central leaders, not people against Islam, but people who come from mainstream Islam, when we hear that they are willing to sacrifice a lot in order to make peace, then it gives a total different perspective and hope. And I myself have been traveling a lot in the Arab world, in many Arab countries, and also working with the authentic leaders of the Muslims in the Holy Land, of all the different kinds. And I sincerely believe that it is possible, and that also the rabbis, who sometimes are very radical and seemingly against the peace, if we talk about a religious peace, it's already a different story.
Okay, you have a very strong background and you have influence in your government. What are you personally doing? I know you mentioned about these groups, but what can you do from government level to make a difference, to actually make something moving towards peace?
Well, I wouldn't exaggerate my influence in government. Just now I'm not in government, by the way. I'm totally civil society. I'm a rabbi of the big community, but I'm not just now in government. But even when I was in government, I was in opposition in government. So I'm always in opposition. This is, I believe it's part of being Jewish, is to be in opposition. And
Opposition to what exactly?
in opposition to everything which I feel is not right, is not just, is not peaceful. I think that this is what our prophets were doing. Our prophets were always talking truth to power. And I would like this to be the role of all religious leaders, of Muslim religious leaders, Christian, Jewish, that we can talk truth to power. The power have their own interests, their own egos, to stay in power, not necessarily to do good for the people. And what we're trying to do is to establish the coalitions. We can't do it alone, but to establish the coalitions, we've built up a lot. We have built a trust with many Palestinian Muslim leaders, together with many rabbis, and this work is expanding. We had some years ago a breakthrough. We made a big conference in Alexandria, in Egypt, made a declaration in Alexandria. I did this, at that time I was in the cabinet, I did it together with my Palestinian colleague, Sheikh Tal El-Sidel, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But his work, and he was both a sheikh and a member of the Palestinian cabinet, one of the founders of the Hamas, by the way. But his work is being continued by many, many courageous Palestinian Muslim leaders, both inside Israel and in the Palestinian areas. And I think that from this place, we might have a breakthrough in the whole political process.
Okay, that was my next question. Do you actually see a breakthrough happening, given that the strong stance the government takes in certain issues, inflexibility in certain issues, whether is with Hamas or whether with the Israeli government? Do you see any breakthrough, a fair breakthrough, anytime soon?
Well, you have to understand, it's not just that the Israeli government takes a strong issue on Hamas. Hamas also takes a strong issue on Israel and on the possibilities of Israel to exist and to live. If Hamas has said, we want to negotiate with Israel, then I'm sure the Israelis would negotiate with Hamas. So it goes two ways. But I know that there are people inside Hamas who want to change this attitude, and there are people inside the Israeli public who understand that you can't ignore totally a big part of the Palestinian population if you really want to reach peace. So to tell you that I'm very optimistic just now, no, I'm not. But I always learned from my father, who was a very clever rabbi, and still is, by the way. I always learned that if we don't see the lights in the end of the tunnel, it's not because the light is not there. It's because the tunnel is not straightforward. Sometimes it goes to one side, sometimes to the other side. We have no choice. Listen, we're living in the Holy Land together. We have maybe 11.5 million living between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River. It's a small, small country. We're not going to go away. We're not going anywhere else. And the Palestinians are not going anywhere else. We might wish to wake up in the morning and the other side is gone.
Yeah.
Or might think that we can beat them with a war or with terror or something else. We can't. We are there forever and ever, and the Palestinians are there forever and ever. So we might as well do what is sensible and find a way of coexistence and of respect. And I think that from our religious traditions, there is so much in common, if we really work it out together, that we can help the politicians to do their job. Not that we be instead of the politicians, but we give the legitimization, because most people in the Middle East are religious people, either religious Jews or religious Muslims, and also some Christians. And they look towards religion as their main source of identity, of legitimization. And therefore, if the peace is not a religious peace, if it does not respect the respect for religion, for religious values, for family values, for modesty, for other of the values of, it's not kind of some cheap secularization process which takes the most base and worst values of the Western world and imposes them on a traditional society. If it will be a peace which will respect also religion and will respect the values and the moral of religion, and this religious people can do much better than secular.